We're rolling.
Welcome to the House Dudes podcast, where we invite you to follow us on our journey towards financial freedom using the power of real estate. I'm Jack Haas.
And I'm Josh Koth. Here at House Dudes, we believe in a couple key principles. Number one, the best way to retain information is by teaching it to others. And number two, a rising tide lifts all boats. We're not competitors, we're a community. So let's get into some real estate investing.
So today we thought we'd do a case study and a kind of a book review because both Josh and myself are pretty big fans of a book called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
Never Split the Difference. This is a great book. I had it in paper form, read it, and then gave it away to someone at a networking group. And then I kept hearing people mention it again and again. So I thought, I had a long drive ahead of me one time, and I downloaded the Audible version and listened to it the entire way too, and got all super fired up about the specific techniques. And then we ended up implementing them in a recent deal. So we wanted to kind of talk about how we utilize techniques from the book to get this specific deal locked up and kind of take you through the numbers and our exact approach.
So let's start off. Where did this deal start? Well, this deal started, it was on the MLS to begin with at $249,000, and they did get an offer pretty quickly, but the deal fell apart because of some heaving issues in the split level downstairs area, living area.
So they had a deal, they had their deal fall apart. So they thought they had it sold. The buyer backed out. And then how did they initially come to us?
They received a postcard.
Okay, so they must have received an equity list postcard. And they called into our CRM, and then off to the races we go. Then once we had a chance to interact with them, we were able to start utilizing some of these techniques. But the funny thing was we had kind of had our initial conversations with them prior to me getting all fired up about the Never Split the Difference book again. So how did it begin? You're the ones that interacted with them. So tell the audience kind of where you were sitting with them when you first interacted with them.
Well, we have kind of a script that we've been perfecting when it comes to talking to motivated sellers on that initial contact. There was enough interest there and enough opportunity that it necessitated me driving over there like that afternoon and do a walkthrough and meet them face to face.
Yeah, so basically our initial phone call is to kind of see if there's enough motivation there for us to take the next step, which would be to go to the property. So you detected there was. So talk about when you got there, how that interaction went. And you just kind of your overall demeanor and vibe when you're speaking to them, because there's a couple important things to remember.
Well, I always start things off. You set that stage. You tell them it's going to take 20 minutes or so to walk through the place. Let them show you around. You're trying to build that rapport as you're going through the house. You try to notice a couple things so you can build some sort of common interest. But I think the big thing is, and you can actually physically see people relax when you tell them. Then we'll sit down at the end of after we walk through, we'll discuss a few things. And, if it doesn't work out, that's perfectly fine. We can't buy them all type of.
Yeah, you're giving them permission to say no. And that it also sets the stage that you're not super excited and desperate to purchase this particular house. And it kind of relieves a lot of that sales pressure. And also makes them start thinking, well, maybe I have to start convincing this guy to buy my house, not that he's automatically going to want it that bad.
Yeah, in fact, that's a really good point. And we heard somebody recently describe it like, chasing your dog? If you chase your dog, he's going to keep running away from you, but as soon as you turn around and run the other way, he'll start chasing you.
Yeah, that was Tom Kroll that said that, by the way, to give credit where credit's due. But yeah, you never want to be chasing them. You want to be always kind of less interested than you are and less excited than they are, and so that they're kind of chasing you. And that's always the level of the relationship. That's where you want it to be at, is them chasing you, hopefully. So at what point, when you left the house, did you give them kind of a number, or did you kind of say, we're going to go back to the office and analyze, or at what point did they hear our initial number?
Well, I did do a pretty broad anchor.
Well, actually, I don't mean to interrupt. Did they give you? Okay, we knew it was listed at 249, so that listing was dead. So, did they give you their number that they were willing to take first?
Yeah, that initial number. Well, they started at that 249.
Really? So even after they had a deal fall through on the MLS and some investors call, they're still trying to stick with the 249 number.
Well, and then we started getting into the conversation regarding the basement issue, because that was their perceived pain point.
Right.
And then because after asking them some questions, I learned that they had gone through this exact problem about 10 years prior, and the amount of work and effort and cost that was associated with it at that time. So they had that experience already. So I just essentially asked, how long did it take? How much did it cost to get it fixed that first time? And I let them start running those calculations on their own.
So what was the first number uttered by either party that was not 249?
I think the next number was like 220.
So that was them coming down. So they're taking 30 grand off the top without you saying a number yet.
Right.
So that's already, going to be the top end, 220-ish. So then what happened after that?
Well, the next thought was, I typically ask, if I could pay cash and close quickly, and I throw in some of those other things about not having to pay realtor fees.
Mm-hmm.
If there is another number that they could come up with,
and just by asking that question, you immediately get another reduction, don't you?
Yeah, usually do.
It's always at least $5,000.
Yep. And in this case, I think it was closer to, now we're getting closer to 200.
Wow. So you took them down 49,000 pretty much on site, or, within a few hours of taking that phone call.
Right.
They had dropped from 250 to basically 200. But we weren't done yet. So then at what point did they hear your offer?
Well, my first anchor was almost, I've been trying to get in the habit of asking their number like almost 5 times before I finally give something. Mm-hmm. Whether that is me just trying to get a number from them, I will try to get in the habit of asking for it 5 times. Or if they are ratcheting down, I try to do it 5 times. So
yeah, just keep bringing up points and let them talk, and they will negotiate against themselves. It's pretty magical to watch. If you just keep them talking and you don't give them a number, they'll just start working their way down. I mean, it's pretty impressive to hear. I mean, we're already from 250 to 200 before you've even said a number.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that I think that's one of the big mistakes a lot of people make when they first start out is giving their number too early. Because that's actually the only leverage and the only value you can give that early on. Mm-hmm. So until you start asking questions and they can start to understand and see the other value you're bringing to the conversation, as soon as you give a number, you're basically being escorted out the door. So,
especially if you're in a competitive market where there's lots of other sophisticated investors that are also pursuing the same property. Basically, then they're just shopping each investor against each other. Okay, I got this guy's number. Okay, let's get the next guy's number. Okay, let's take the highest number from these 5 guys we talked to. Luckily, this didn't seem to be the case, so you had a little bit more. You could be a little bit more methodical in your approach because it seems like we were the only ones talking to this couple.
Yeah.
Here's another point too: is you got them talked down 50,000 basically right out of the gate, and you hadn't even really said your price yet. And this is where the never split the difference things comes in, because a lot of investors would just say, okay, let's just meet them in the middle. They were at 250. We're going to be. And initially, when you ran your numbers, where did you want to buy this property? What was a good price to buy this property at?
About 160.
160. Okay, so between 250 and 160, you could have bought it for 200, and that would have been meeting in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean we would have made any money either wholesaling or wholetailing or retailing this property out.
Right.
But that would have been how many negotiations would have went. You would have just kind of met in the middle and just kicked the ball across the net a few times and met in the middle around 200, and we may have eked out a profit at that number. But what's amazing, I think, to see is where we end up purchasing the property for based on their initial number of 250 and our initial number of 160 that we had in our head of that we wanted to purchase this property for. So tell me about how you gave them our first offer and what that number was after they had talked themselves down to 200.
So when I run our comps, and Josh and I do this just slightly differently, I kind of rely pretty heavily on our CRM, and it pulls in quite a bit of data. And I always typically will use the low end of the value range that spits out. So that number that we're looking for is ARV, so after repair value. So that's similar properties in decent condition that have sold in the area, gives you a range, and you try to stay on the low end, and that's the number that we think we could sell the property for. Yeah, we in the end, even though they had it on the market and got a full price offer that first weekend at $249. Mm-hmm. I want a red flag price when we do list it on the MLS. So I'm going to be targeting like $225, $228.
Yeah, if we sell it to a retail buyer, we want to have a price that makes them go, is this a typo? This is too good to be true. And so it sells super quick. So that's the number we're trying to end up at for a sale price. So you ran your comps around that number. So tell me about how they first heard your offer.
Well, I didn't say my offer until I basically waited until I got that. I asked a discount 5 times, mm-hmm. and then we're chatting, and I definitely don't ask any numbers until I feel like they have a good sense of the value we can offer. Whether it's the close quickly, if that's important to them. I think we're kind of lucky in this situation too, because when they received that full price offer that first time around, they were already mentally spending that money.
Right. So they had been thinking past the sale. They'd been imagining themselves free of this house onto greener pastures. And what we were offering was really, it's not even the quick close and all that. It's more about this deal's not going to fall apart. Right. That's really what we were offering was if you sign this, this price might suck. You might not like this price, but if you sign this piece of paper, you're going to get the money. You're going to be free of this albatross.
Right.
And the funny thing is, this house, we buy really tore up houses a lot of the time. What was the condition of this property?
It's like immaculate. The place is super clean. In fact, the only significant issue we're probably going to have to deal with is the unlevel, the heaving of the basement. But that could be just some.
Yeah, it's not going to, in our experience, that's not going to be much of a problem. But the thing to take away from this is not only owners of completely trashed houses are willing to take a deeply discounted price. There's other things at play and other reasons why people might want to just be done with the property. So sometimes you can pick up really clean houses. This is the second one in like 3 months that we've got under contract that will need very, very little work, if any.
Yeah, and this one is as well. It's in a great neighborhood. It's just a really good place.
Yeah, perfect wholesale opportunity. So let's get back to again. Tell me how you submitted the first time they heard an offer from us.
Well, I actually did it verbally.
Okay, were you at the?
I was at their kitchen table.
So this is during the first walkthrough.
Yeah.
So this is only like an hour or two after they called in on the postcard.
Yep. We're sitting around the table. And they were pressing me for that number, and I finally felt like we were in a position for me to give my first anchor. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I did anchor them at the 160.
Okay. So, just for starting points, they were at 250. We were at 160. That was the kind of the two end points of the negotiation here. And they had already talked themselves down to 200. So even if we did meet them in the middle between 160 and 200, that price would be 180. And again, that would be considered perfectly normal. A year ago, before we had read Never Split the Difference, we would have probably happily paid 180 because we knew we could sell it for 220, make a nice 20,000, 25,000 with commissions and everything pretty quickly. No reason not to do that, right? Mm-hmm. But we thought, well, let's, and I had been taking a long road trip and reading the book and listening to the book on Audible. And I was like, let's try some of these tactics. And it just happened to be right when you got...
and I should just interrupt here quick. As soon as I set that anchor, they came down another $15,000 because then they were trying to split the difference towards me. So...
So also they were at
185. When I left, we were at 185.
So think about that. Okay, before you walked out of the property, they had reduced their price from 250 to 185. That's a pretty significant percentage reduction. And now we're only 25 apart, which even if you did split the difference, again, you'd be at 172 or something like that. And that would be a good price. And every time we meet in the middle, it's becoming more and more profitable here. But so let's talk about how we implemented some of the follow-up and Never Split the Difference specific language in order to get a really good price in the end.
So yeah, when I got back to the office, I wrote up the property and basically put it in writing and gave them the offer at 160. And
that's another important point too, is you never want to just leave it verbally. You want to give them the gravitas of having a written offer. So if we have a number, we always write it up because we know that carries a lot more weight than just offhand mentioning it at someone's table and then not following through. They want to see that you're following through, and it indicates to them, okay, these guys are serious. They're putting it on paper. And it's tantalizing to them because then they're thinking, boy, if I sign this, I'm getting the money. Even though I don't like this price, this deal's going to close. I don't have to worry about this property anymore. This problem is over with.
Yep. And then, so after I put it in writing and I emailed it over to them, I just followed up a day or two later and asked them where they were, what their thoughts were. Thankfully, I did that because when you start sending some of these things out, it's always good to double check. If you don't hear back from them, don't assume that they're not interested. Because in this case, they found my email in their spam folder.
Yeah, because I think we were using DocuSign or something, and sometimes spam folder grabs that thing, so you got to make sure that they get it. So it's important to follow up. Plus, follow-up is so key anyways. And even if they hate the number and you're nowhere close and they have no chance of accepting it, by following up, you're giving yourself another opportunity to find out why and see how far apart you are. And then, in fact, that's a good strategy. Just if the deal's seemingly dead, you can just say, well, now that it's over and there's no sales pressure, you can say, well, how close were we? What would you have really taken rock bottom? And then, boom, there's another reduction because they're going to come down some again. So then you're even closer now.
Yeah, and you can start the negotiation again.
So at this point, then I had created a Word doc and started putting some phrases specifically from Never Split the Difference for you to use in your replies. And here's a couple phrases we used are, your offer is very generous. I do like this property. I feel bad. I wish I could do that, but I simply can't. And you say things like, this is embarrassing, but I just can't do that. You're kind of taking responsibility. And these are some key phrases he mentions. So do you actually have could you pull up the email that you sent them and see how you implemented some of these? Or were they used verbally on the phone? I don't remember which.
Yeah, it was most. I actually feel that I do much better verbally than I do in any kind of written form. So I will have a tendency to want to meet somebody and talk to them in person or over the phone.
So now, okay, they got our offer of 160, and they were at basically 185 when you called them back, and they had talked themselves down again. So then what kind of language did you use, or what some of these Never Split the Difference phrases or techniques did you use to get them to come down again?
Well, I definitely used the I was very apologetic, and it's very authentic because right. I do feel pretty crappy about this at this point. It is uncomfortable.
Yeah, you wish the business model would allow us to pay more, and they would be even profit even more when they walked away from the house. But we have to, this is how we feed our kids. So, we have to make a minimum amount of profit. And, so it is okay to feel bad about it. It's authentic, and you just kind of let it all hang out there. And I think they can hear or read that authenticity when you're saying, boy, I really feel bad about this, but this is the best I can do.
So so they were pretty insistent on that I just kind of revisit the numbers and see if there was anything better I could do. At that point, I did do another calculation, and this is from a couple of resources, John Martinez as well as Never Split the Difference. They both advise always to, if you're going to give them like a final number, make sure it's an oddball number.
Not just because our initial offer is $160,000 even.
Right.
Now this next offer was what number?
It was like $161,905.
Right, and it makes it, you seem like, okay, you really ran this through your calculations. You really, all your minds came together and came up with this number. It's not arbitrary. It shows some finality to it. And you really reached your upper limit, and that's to the dollar what we can push to.
And in my case, that is exactly the situation.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of tried to keep the emotion out of it. That is the exact number that my calculator gave me.
Right.
So that's the number I gave them.
Yeah, so if you do have a formula or like a spreadsheet that spits out a number based on the comps in the area, what you can pay, and it spits out an odd number, use that number because that's only going to help you because it seems non-arbitrary. So really, so then you submitted that number. It was up just slightly. It was up basically $1,000 and change from 160. So that's the entire amount we came up in this negotiation, and they came all the way down from 250. So tell us how they came down from 185 to ultimately taking our offer of 161 and change.
Well, in the end, every time I had a small, short conversation with them, it was usually around. I've gotten better and better at letting the uncomfortable silence just sit there.
Yes, that's key.
And just let them come and start the conversation. I'm never trying to I don't want to convince anybody of anything. Never. I just let them come to their own conclusion. So in this case, especially the last conversation, they were talking about wanting to put in an offer on a place down in Arizona or something like that. They're done dealing with the Fargo winners.
Right.
He started talking about how they don't want to have to go through the pain of doing the basement repair. And they asked if I could come up again. And I actually just said, any kind of increase is really going to be, it won't move the needle, and
it's not going to be significant. So
it
really,
wasn't going to be significant enough, and I'm really sorry. I wish we could have come to some sort of agreement, but unfortunately I'm pretty stuck where I'm at.
And then you're basically walking away. You're using language that indicates, sorry, this didn't come together, and then that scares them into thinking, oh, wait a minute, this guy might walk. He might go buy someone else's house. So rather than saying, if you take my price, we're good, and this could still happen, you're basically saying, I'm sorry we couldn't come together, and sorry this didn't work out. And that language indicates to them that you're starting to walk away. Mm-hmm. And they want to save that. They want to salvage the deal.
Well, and at the time, too, you were looking at other houses, too, so I'm sure I mentioned something about that as well, that, I just couldn't guarantee that the money was going to be there, and I couldn't have the opportunity or this offer sitting there for too much longer.
Yeah, and the thing is, this is all true. I was making offers on other houses, so we're not like, this isn't marketing BS. This is all true. I mean, we only have a limited amount of cash you can deploy at any one time. So, if I was to get another house under contract, we may not be able to buy this house. So that's not even BS. It's all true, authentic things that lets them know that there's some scarcity, some urgency here. And a lot of times you just have to get them to mentally give themselves permission to accept what's in front of them. Another term that was good from the Never Split the Difference was another idea is to remember that the person that you're negotiating with isn't the enemy, that the issue is. So you're never saying like, you'll never get more money out of me. I don't like you. You never get more money out of me. You're never going to win. It's really, I wish the market or this property would allow me to pay more money, or our business model would allow us to pay more money. But unfortunately for you and I, it doesn't. Mm-hmm. So really, it's never you against that person. You're working together against this issue, which is, hey, can we work out a deal on this particular property?
Right. Yeah, and
so it never got contentious between you two.
Never. Yeah, no. And you try to avoid that as much as possible. I mean, in fact, anytime that I've felt, I didn't have this situation in this case, but I've had it in previous when it has felt like it's gotten contentious.
People get mad when they hear this initial offer sometimes.
Yeah. In those cases, I've actually just taken ownership and apologized and just basically said, I'm sorry if I caused some sort of offense and
yep.
And and I usually take that as an opportunity to walk away as well. Mm-hmm. Just saying, I'm sorry I caused such offense and I didn't really mean to do that. I'm sorry it didn't work out. And then if there was a deal there, they'll still save you.
Yeah, and we'll just say things like, just always be, like you said, super apologetic. And, I'll say things like, if you can get more money somewhere else, I'd encourage you to do that. We're really want to be on their side. And, if they wanted to, they already had it listed with an agent and that had fallen apart. So they were kind of soured on that idea. Mm-hmm. So, they had been down that road. We didn't have to present that as an option for them to, knock down. They were already on board with, not listing on the MLS again. So really a lot of the objections have been taken care of.
And we're all trying to beat winter too. They want to move before winter hits. We need to get it taken care of and on the market before winter hits. We're all kind of pressed on time.
Yeah. So there's some built-in seasonal urgency there, which in Fargo we have a lot of.
Yeah.
So that worked in our favor as well because it's mid-August here. So the time frame, is definitely catching up to them and us. So that was a motivator as well. So really, let's kind of wrap this up. But I wanted to mention real quick in the Never Split the Difference, there's a thing called the Ackerman Bargaining, which gives you a series of steps of how to, if you do have to haggle on price, how much to raise incrementally, and then how to use empathy and say no many, many times before you increase your counter. And I think that you did this pretty expertly in this particular negotiation because you literally came up one time of $1,000 off 160, and they came down from 249 to 161. I mean, that ratio of them coming down to the amount you came up is ridiculous. And the thing is, 6 months ago, a year ago, we would have met them in the middle somewhere over 170, 185 even, and still made a decent profit and been happy and walked away fine. But utilizing these specific techniques and really just holding firm and kicking it back to them, being empathetic, letting the uncomfortable silences, let them kind of negotiate against themselves. All those things worked in conjunction for them to come all the way down. I mean, 95% of the spread they talked themselves out of.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that, like this light bulb moment, if you will, I mean, how many fewer deals would we have had to do if we would have held firm that for, on our closer to our first numbers? Mm-hmm. It's we've done more deals over the past few years.
How bigger could those spreads have been if we would have implemented this from the start?
And we might have lost some of those deals because of it, but because I think our spreads would have been more consistent and larger and would have easily made up for those lost.
Also, I wouldn't call them necessarily lost because, you can always go back and pay higher. Like if this would have fallen apart and we decided we really wanted this house, we could have called them back and said, we'll give you 180.
True.
A week from now. I mean, we're not in a hyper-competitive market where someone else is swooping in. Fargo's not typically like that. Maybe that wouldn't work in other cities where there's a lot more investor competition. But you can always go back and pay more. So, I mean, if you feel like I'd rather make $20,000 than nothing, that option is still there. But at least take them through this process first and make sure you're maximizing your spread on the front end. And if you do have to come back, my argument would be that you're still going to be at a lower number than had you just met him in the middle initially.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, we could have bought this for $200 and still possibly made a profit. And we could have bought it for $180 and still made a profit. But now we're at $161, so that spread is going to be much larger. So that's kind of some techniques we use from Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Really look up the Ackerman Bargaining haggling system that's contained in that book. And, the overall lesson is that if you just kind of hold firm and stick to this process, you can negotiate much larger spreads than initially you thought possible.
Go get the book.
Get it.
We've put a lot of effort into providing useful content, and if you've found value in the show and have any interest in supporting us with a small donation, head over to patreon.com/housedudes.
And if you have any thoughts or questions, shoot us an email at info@housedudes.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter @housedudes. And if you like what you're hearing, head over to iTunes, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It really helps other investors out there find the show.
And remember, massive positive impact requires
massive positive action. We'll see you next time. This episode is brought to you by housedudes.com. Do you live in a good cash flowing market? If so, Turnkey isn't the best choice for you. You should buy in your market. If you don't live in a great market for investors, where can you find profitable cash flowing properties? We love the Midwest, where prices are reasonable and the people are great. We personally invest here and have lived in the area all of our lives. So how does Turnkey work? We find the property, we rehab the property, and we find you a tenant and place you under the care of our local property manager, who we trust with all our own investment properties. I'm sure you have questions about how the process works and what to do next. If that's the case, fill out the contact form on housedudes.com and we'll reach out to see if you are a good fit for our business. We have a limited supply of properties every month, so we can only sell to a select few qualified buyers. We'll see you on housedudes.com.
I don't like to tell a man what to do with his money, but if you ain't investing in property, then you're dumber than a dummy.
I'm not dumb. I'm smart.
Well, buy property. That's my advice.